welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Writers Toolshed. It's Richie here today. I am delighted to be joined by Alex Greenwood, who is an award-winning writer of the acclaimed John Pilati mysteries, a PR guru, and host of not one but two podcasts, PR After Hours and Mysterious Goings On, which Alex kindly invited me onto not long ago. And I enjoyed our chat so much, and I think it's because Alex and I have quite similar outlooks on life. And Alex is someone who's genuinely motivated to help other people with their writing and marketing. So ever since we had that chat, I just wanted to get Alex on here and to share his insights. So Alex, thank you very much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you very much, Richie. I feel the same way you do. I think we had a really nice connection when you were on my show, and I'm very honored to be asked to be here.
Oh, no, thanks for joining me. Now, I mentioned a few different things there about what you've done in your career to date. Do you want to tell us a bit about your writing and PR job? Like, how did you get into that?
I've been in public relations. I started my career, actually, my first paying jobs out of college in journalism. I was a newspaper editor, excuse me, I was a newspaper reporter for a mid-sized metro daily for a little while, and then I became a small town newspaper editor and enjoyed that for immensely for a couple of years. And then I got back into doing what I studied for in school, which was public relations. Nice. And I have worked in public relations. I worked with various companies, working up the ladder in public relations and or some marketing too, and started my career as an associate at a hospital complex. And then I just kind of worked around, and I worked in healthcare and higher education and some private business stuff, and enjoyed that. And I did that for decades. And then about 11 years ago, I started my own consultancy here in Kansas City, Missouri, United States, where I'm a public relations consultant. We used to be kind of an agency with a staff of about 5 or 6 at one point, but most recently, the past few years, it's just been me. And if I needed help, I'd get a contractor. But I feel like the reason I went into public relations is, one, I like to think about concepts. And I view the written word as foundational to good public relations practitioners. And I enjoy crafting words and crafting sentences and creating messaging that works for my clients and it informs people. So that's why I do what I do for my day job. And so I get to write for my day job, a lot of it. But it's obviously different than my mystery series or any of my other fiction work.
How do you find the two? I'm like you. I work in marketing and obviously do writing as well. So I find that the marketing job really does help me a lot when it comes to promoting and finding readers. How have you found that the PR experience for you?
It's been good for me in the sense that you keep your chops, as we say. A lot of us say you keep your chops going. I keep my writing chops, but it's different writing muscles. If we can go ahead and torture a metaphor further, chops to muscles. Here we go. I find that it keeps those skills sharp, and it helps me there. And actually, it's what's interesting too is I think that my fiction work makes me a little more creative in my public relations writing and my public relations work. It gives me, I think, maybe a slightly richer palette to choose from in a lot of ways. So I don't know if that works for you or not, Richie, but it certainly does for me. I find that very helpful. Although the dark side of that, not the dark side, ooh, spooky, darky, but the flip side, the not so great side of that though is, especially if I'm coming off a week where it's just been, hunched over the keyboard, probably the last thing I want to do is work on writing my novel or writing a short story. I just want to get away from the screen, and I have horrible handwriting, so I can't just get away from the screen and write on a yellow pad because I can't read it. I don't know what I'm saying. I should have been a doctor, apparently. Yeah. So there you go. That's where I am with that. But I've managed to make it work. I'm on just as we speak, finishing up the 8th book in my series, and I'm finishing up my portion until I shove it off to my editor and for him to have migraines over. I'm looking forward to getting that out the door, as I say, and then having a little bit more brain power and free time to kind of work on just work stuff, and as I call work. It's work. So Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that, and I'll probably do, like, I don't know if you do this, but a little palate cleanser. I usually, when I finish a novel, I'll say, okay, this will be the eighth one. So when I finish them, I've done this every time. It seems within a week or so, the writing habit, or the writing process is still intact, and so I need to write something, and usually I'll write a short story or a novella
Yeah.
or something short and pretty easy to get with, just to kind of, and it'll be something radically different than what my novel's about. And I don't know why I do that. I call it a palate cleanser. Have you ever done
Yeah.
such a thing?
I'm actually doing that right now.
Are you
So it's
really?
very funny that you brought that up. Yeah. But I struggled to get back into it. I After I finished Prize and Events, I just couldn't. I thought I'll have a month off because it just hammered the work. And then I found when I came back to writing again that I couldn't do it. I'd forgotten how to do it. I just fell out of practice so quickly. It was insane. So, but yeah, I'm currently writing halfway through a novella, and I've just finished a short story as well. So, like you say, it's just a great refresher, and I don't know, it's just nice to do something a bit different because when you write a novel, like I took me 2 years to write my last one, like the editing as well. That's a long time to be stuck on something, isn't it?
I tell you what, I've said this, and I have a grand time usually writing, but I've had some problems. You and I think, touched on this when you were on my show during lockdown. It just was. I thought, oh, I'll have all this time, and I'll be so, I have nothing else to do. I'll just write. I'll just be,
Yeah.
incredible. No, and so,
Yeah.
so I feel like I've been in jail with this, with not only with lockdown, but with this book. I feel like I've been just like thrown into a jail cell with this book, and generally the book is an amiable cellmate, but there's been some days and weeks even where I'm like, get this other cellmate out of here, get this book out of here. I can't stand it
Yeah.
anymore. I'm stuck. But fortunately, though, it's funny. Right about the time I got my vaccination, I started noticing that mentally I was freed up, and once my family got theirs and everybody in my area I felt like was being safer and all that, I think it freed up a lot of uh, probably mental energy that I had
Yeah.
worrying about people. And then it became fun again. You know that part, Richie, where you're working on the book, and it's like getting the clay on the table before you sculpt the clay.
Yeah.
But you get to that point though, once you've kind of got a good shape going. Like, say it's going to be like a bust or something, like the guy behind me. Or I don't know if for video or not for your listeners, but there's a little phrenology head behind me on the shelf. But it starts looking more like a head, right? And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And then you're like doing all that stuff that sculptors do, and you're like, okay, that's how the eyes are going to look, and here's how the nose is going to look. And then I'll go back and reread it, and I'll go, oh my gosh, that's the wrong nose, and I'll resculpt the nose. But the point being, here I go torturing metaphors again, but the point being, I'm at that point now where I'm going back through a 60,000 word book and finding connections I didn't know were there when I wrote that part of it initially, which to me
Yeah.
is a joy. And also realizing, oh, okay, that's not going to work. But oh, here's a nice Easter egg I'll put in here. You and I talked about
Yeah.
Easter eggs in our books. So I'm in that part right now, and I'm about to write within the next few days the exciting conclusion of the book. And so I'm very excited about that.
It's awesome. I've actually just downloaded the second book in the
Oh,
series.
Pilot's Key.
I think it is that one. Yeah, yeah. You probably know
Yeah,
more than me. Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm gonna dive into that. Do I need to read them in order? Because I bought that one by accident, thinking it was the first one. Don't know why.
Well, a lot of people wish it was.
Oh
Because,
really?
I think the first one's fine. The first one, Pilot's Cross, sets the table, but
Yeah.
Pilot's Key was the one where things really took off. I think it got some nice acclaim and some good reviews and sold the most so far. Well, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of scary considering there's been six books since that one, but or will be, and that this is still one of the favorites. But that's okay. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. That one takes place in Key West, where I mentioned to you earlier. I was might take a trip down there. It's a little southern tip of Florida, a little island,
Yeah.
and Pilot's Key takes place mostly there. And it's a sea adventure. It's a mystery. It's a quirky. Well, if you read the first one at all, I don't know if you did, you'll see it's a quirky story, and I think what a nice person said to me was, you kind of make this cozy mystery into a really quirky, fun thing with a strange lead character, and I'm just like, well, good, because who wants to read the same old,
Yeah,
So yeah, I hope you
exactly.
enjoy it. I hope you
Yeah.
enjoy. I hope you find the key, pilot's key.
I'll be sure to leave a review. Even yeah.
Hmm?
So one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on, Alex, is because life, as you know, is getting back to normal a bit now.
Yeah.
And for authors, particularly introverted people like me, we've had the luxury of promoting our book from the comfort of our offices or armchairs or wherever you do your work. Um, Now we've got to get back out into the real world and do a bit of promoting.
Right.
And being a public relations master, I was wondering whether you had any insights that you could share with us writers about how to promote our books in the real world.
I'll give it my best shot. It's a continual frustration for me that I've been doing PR for 27 years, yet when I put a new book out, I have to fight just as hard to get any attention for it as anybody else.
Yeah,
There's a couple of things that I recommend. There's a couple of strategies that I've used, and I'm going to tell you that have mixed results, but probably definitely better than nothing. So from a PR standpoint, just to be clear, and of course you're a marketing guy, I'm a PR guy. There's a difference between us. Marketing does things one way, PR does it the other. And the major
yeah,
difference is with public relations is that we're about earned media, which means simply we're not buying ads. We are trying to, by dint of telling a good story,
yeah,
trying to get news out there. We use the news media, but also social media. And then we find other ways to get around that. And I can kind of give you some examples of each. But I'll tell you this, for example, I've I always every time I do a book, I put out a press release. You've seen one for my latest book on podcasting. I always do a
yeah,
release like that just to get it out there. Almost nobody prints it, but the fact is it's out there and it lays out, what's going on. So I do the same thing with all my novels. And
yeah,
every now and then I get lucky. When I rolled out my third one, I rolled it out on Halloween as Pilot's Ghost. I thought that'll work. So I got booked on a local television show where the hosts, the chat hosts in the show were all the TV. They were all dressed in costume and
yeah,
for Halloween, which is fun. I love Halloween. It's like my Christmas, to be honest. But anyway, I got booked on there to be the author to talk about Pilot's Ghost. And it's very strange because I think that the news media has so little bandwidth for books in particular, and I don't want to be
yeah,
depressing, okay? But that book came out. I was on TV, and I could probably tell you I sold 5 whole books from that appearance, which is fine. That's 5 books I didn't get otherwise. And then I had a YouTube video of it available for me, and
yeah,
and long story short, though, I got asked back to do other things, and then I got asked back by a different station that I go on. That I talk about social media and stuff. But the point
yeah,
being, trying to get a press release out, if you're going to do it, now of course you guys are in the UK, and I don't know the media as well there, but I do know that here in America, what I always advise a client, or I do for a client, I'll write up a press release about what the book is and where to find it, and try to create a good story about the story, a good hook. Like for
yeah,
Pilot's Ghost, the hook was Halloween release of a book about technically a ghost, and that kind of hook, and that worked and got me on TV,
yeah,
and it did get me some radio. So my advice is always to write up a release that has kind of a hook about your book, and Pariah's Lament. You've got this great story, and I think if I were trying to tell a news producer about it to get you booked on TV, for example, or radio, to talk about it,
yeah,
I would talk about how you have the one character and she has the facial thing, right? The
yeah.
has the issue, right? And
Birthmark,
if
yeah,
you if she's the birthmark, and how in this setting where in this world you created, this is like a real strike against her in trying to get anywhere in life, right? And how she overcomes it. I think if I were trying to book you on my local TV station to talk about that, I would look at the calendar and think about, okay, are there certain time, and this is how the news operations
yeah,
in America work. There's an editorial calendar, and like there's certain, here in America we're heavy on these. I don't know how you guys are, but it's like this is February's heart month, heart health month.
yeah,
There's all these different kinds of months, or weeks or days. You might look at one where there might be a day or a week around birth,
Birthmarks, yeah.
issues like in birthmarks, right?
Yeah.
And that's not as silly as it sounds, because when you're pitching that to the news people, you can say, this book is really giving people hope because the lead character has this birthmark and is overcoming society's
Yeah.
expectations and blah blah. So that's just right off the top of my head, okay, Richie. But
That's
I'm
a good
thinking,
idea.
but finding a hook like that, there's nothing wrong with it, because what you're saying to the news people is, I understand you've got a kind of, we call it a news hole, or you've got a hole to fill in your show or in your newspaper or on your radio show, and I want to give you something that's topical
Yeah.
and something that you can latch onto. If you just say, I wrote this book and it's really good, not that you would do that, but some people do, they don't care because they get I mean, I was telling you when you're on my show, I get publicists who send me books constantly. I don't have time to read them all,
Yeah.
and I don't necessarily like all the genres. You know what I mean? But I try to do my best to keep up if they're going to be a guest and do that. But
Yeah.
news stations, at least they used to, they just get books sent to them all the time and promotional ideas, and they get hit on them all the time. So what you got to do is just kind of level the playing field for yourself by creating a hook for your book. Okay, that's TV, radio, broadcast, that kind of thing. Another thing you can do is something I did just before we signed on to talk today.
Yeah.
My local library system has something, and I'm clicking around. Okay, just real quick, I want to tell you what it's called. It's called, this is just our local library system here where I live in Kansas City, Missouri. By the way, if you don't know United States, we're like dead center in the middle of the country. We are, as they call it, flyover country, because people fly over us to get to L.A. or New York or wherever. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
All right. Nothing wrong with being flyover. So we have a program in our library called Read Local. Okay, and I found this, and it's an initiative that highlights local authors through a curated collection of books by writers living within the library service area. Okay,
Let's go.
and I don't know if how your libraries are set, but check it out, and become friends with librarians. Now,
Yeah.
the way they do it, they're like, don't send us your book and say, I live here in town, put it on the shelf. What they do, I just did this process. It was so simple. All I had to do today was to send an email to them with my name in the subject header, and then in the body of the thing, the title of the book, and the book has to be within 5 years old,
Yeah.
which is too bad, because most of my series is more than 5 years old at this point. And I don't have my new book ready. I'll have to pitch it next year
Yeah.
when it comes out. But and what they're saying is you got to be local, and they've got their criteria, but they're basically they want to make sure that you're a serious writer, that you've written more than one thing. There's a whole list of stuff. But what you want to do, I think, it's a great way to kind of go to where the readers are. Well, if they're not
Yeah.
in your local library, really? I mean, that's the place, right? Bookstores have very limited space, and they are generally not going to take somebody unless they've got a track record of being able to
Yeah.
sell books. They just don't have much space.
The
Libraries
business
have more
end of the
space,
day.
but if you work the local angle with your library, just check with your local library, check with
Yeah.
your local bookstore if you want. But I find one helps the other. For example, my books are in about 3 different library systems in America, which is not very much, right? But I've used that to my advantage when I've tried to get a book signing at a bookstore. I said, well, my book's in the library, but I'd rather have a signing for my next book in your store and try to bring
Yeah.
people in. So let me just go segue right into book signings. Okay. Have you
Yeah.
done one of these in person, Richie? Are you going to do one?
I'm actually doing one, yeah, and on the 19th of June.
Okay. It's usually lovely people. Were you going to do it at a bookstore, or where are you going to do it?
Well, it's a bit of a strange one, really, because I haven't actually had a book launch. And it's also my 30th birthday party, and I'm owed a leaving party from my last job, which was like a bar, Irish bar slash community centre. So I'm having a triple header on the
Oh,
19th of
good.
June. But the
Okay.
book launch is going to be a bit of a thing. So I'll be doing like whole little presentation or chat,
Yeah.
book signing. So what have you got to share then about book signing?
No, I think those are great. I've done 3 or 4 book signings. I've done, but I was getting ready to say the book signings, just where you go to a bookstore and you sit there at a table. It can be one of the most awkward things you've ever done in your life, because your family and friends will show up and they've already got the book, and or I always
Yeah,
tell them, okay, if you're going to buy the book, come buy it during the signing, okay? I do a whole, by the way, in Pilot's Key, when you get to that, there's a whole section where he's at a book signing and he's accosted by a reader. You'll love it. Okay. So they can be, I've done them in nice bookstores and they can be fun. And I got like a free brownie and coffee at one of them, which I loved. But I had one where literally nobody wanted to buy a book or have a book signed. And it was in the newspaper and everything. So I tell you that because, well, obviously I'm not Stephen King. I'm not a best-selling author. But I've done those. So what I like to do more and what I recommend to clients more than book signings is what you're talking about where you do a presentation. I've done that at our local library. We had like 60 people came to a presentation though. That was different than a book signing because people realized, oh, I don't have to buy the book. I can go listen to this guy talk. And then incidentally, if they like your talk, they can buy the book when you set up at a table at the end, right? So that's what I did. And I think I did a presentation just explaining how I got started in writing, talking about my first book, talking about my grandfather who wrote westerns. Nice. He's passed on, but I talk like that. That covers so many more bases because you'll get your book signing worked into like a presentation like that, right?
Yeah.
But you'll also get to meet people and they get to do what we're doing right here. They'll get to see you in action and hear you talk, and then you can interact with them and talk back and answer questions, and then. It's also potentially newsworthy. So you might get a little coverage out of it. I'm not saying the news TV will roll up a live truck and say, Richie Billing is here talking about Paradise Limit, but you never know. But you might get a little notice in the local paper or that kind of thing. So those are good. And what you're doing, if you're doing all of those things so far that we're talking about here, you're creating a foundation that's going to help you with a few things. It's going to help you start chipping away at getting some name recognition with the local news media and with your local community and with the people who really matter most, the people who read, buy, sell, and shelf books. Okay, you're going to start doing that, and you're going to make contacts by doing that. So those are the things I recommend you do with everything if you can with a new book. And like you said, I love that you're doing a launch and that you're going to do some maybe a reading, is that right, or answer questions, whatever. That's very beneficial. I could talk a little bit about advertising. I've never felt great. I've just come off doing about a quarter's worth of Google ads for my book series.
Yeah.
And I could tell you a little bit about that, but I don't know if that's as interesting to you. But anyway,
Yeah, most definitely. How did you find? Did you have good results?
I had mixed results. And of course, you're in marketing and I'm basically in marketing too. And we both understand that you can't just buy one ad click, and everything happens. Advertising is, it takes time. And I did 3 months at a modest spend just to get my Cozy Mysteries series out there. And I gotta say, sales have been pretty good, and they've ticked up. They really have. But I'm still weighing whether or not it's worth continuing. Although the marketer in me is saying to me, "Don't be cheap. If you can afford it, you need to keep doing this because the longer you do it, the more the SEO will improve, the more your name will be out there, and you see, So that's what I'm counting on. But one other thing I've done, and I'm thinking about, I tried to do it last year, but I just think with everything going on, is to try to get placements. I work with a company that can basically get a one-sheeter into newspapers. There's 4,000 newspapers and news outlets and online stuff here in the United States, and you get writers. Let's say we got 5 writers to chip in. We'd all each do like a holiday gift guide for Christmas or something. This holiday season, get Paradise Lament by Richie Billing, and then there's like a 75-word, dynamic sentence about why, and then there's a link to it to go sell and do that. So I got thrown into one of those. I was the only book. It was just a holiday gift guide kind of thing. So it's a one-pager. You may have seen them in your local papers or that kind of thing. And it did extremely well. It got picked up by the Chicago newspaper, and I mean, I've got tear sheets that'll blow your mind with how well it did. And I had the best holiday sales I've had in 10 years.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it's not cheap. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. I'll tell you. Those ads can be anywhere from a couple of grand on up, and I got kind of a deal and got kind of put in there because they're wanting me to test it out a little bit. So I got a pretty good deal, and I'm not saying I've made back every penny on it, but it's intrigued me enough to where if I ever get real budget again, which is what I'm working towards with my day job, is to fund my writing.
Yeah,
Um, I'm gonna try it again. But if you want, I'll put you on the list when I try to organize this
yeah,
again, just so you can take a look at it, Richie,
that'll
and
be
see.
interesting.
And
Yeah,
yeah, all right then. So
yeah. I'm always looking at like interesting ways to promote books, and like you say, I've got the stage now where I use ads. I'm actually, funnily enough, turned my ads off because I get a steady sales every day, and I was just reviewing. I was using Facebook ads, and I was just reviewing that, and I, I was getting clicks, but you're never sure whether they convert. Just turned it
right.
off, and I also turned Amazon ads off as well, and the sales have continued. So I don't know what's going on. Whether I've just sort of the book is sort of ranked for some good keywords, and it gets good traffic. So I've stopped advertising at the moment because I'm just getting sort of sales for.
Well, I think too. It's clearly we call this the mysterious goings on bump. You have appeared on my show, and the sales are now.
Yeah,
I
to the
wish.
belief. Yeah,
I
figured it.
totally wish.
Yeah,
No, no. And I think you're in a genre with Paraz Lament. I think you're in a genre that I think that fans of that genre are very, and I say this kindly, or rabid. They get excited about these kind of books, and I think more so. I think the mystery fans are a little more laid back. I wish they were and I have nothing to, I have nothing to base that on
yeah,
except just a perception. But it just seems like all the fantasy writers I know that are putting out a decent product are making decent sales. Whereas a lot of my mystery and thriller buddies, ugh, not so much. So
yeah.
I don't know. Have
You
you
could,
ever you've thought about that or
I don't know. I just write what I like. So I've always just sort of enjoyed reading fantasy. So that's what I've just sort of written for. I do write other things. But one thing I was going to ask you as well, because it's an idea I've always had, but I've always sort of been a bit unsure about to act upon it. Now, you're saying about finding readers. Now, what about sort of getting into book clubs?
into? I'm
So
sorry.
into book clubs. So people like groups, reading groups.
Yeah, that can be really good too. I've done that once and it was comically bad, but that was because that's a long story I won't go into. Other than it was one of the worst nights of my life. But anyway,
Oh yeah.
no, yeah, well, it was a group of ladies who drank wine and also, oh by the way, read books. And I just had one very well, actually, I took that experience. I took it out of a book club and made it into a book signing in the Pilot's Key section. So if you in the Pilot's Key,
Yeah.
so if you read that, you'll catch it. But no, book clubs are great because, again, we're like you said, we're finding readers where they are, and people who have a book club, they love to read. They love books, ostensibly they do, and they are very. I think they're very good, and I think it's great to get on a list. And I think if you just I mean, you can usually nowadays a lot of book clubs have web pages and blogs and
Yeah.
stuff, and sometimes they translate just the book club experience into a blog post about okay, well, this is what we thought, and everybody agreed on this, and we didn't like that so much, or so I would Google around and look, and of course here we go back to the library. The library's probably got a list of book clubs
Yeah.
that you should hit. But yeah, I mean, what I do too, and I mean, now here's the thing, writers. A lot of writers are thinking, oh, well, if a book club's going to read it, I better just give them the books. Like, no, no, they buy the books, and you
Yeah.
buy the book, you sell your books to them. If you want to. If they don't want to go through Amazon or wherever they're at a shop and they want to get it directly from you, maybe you can give them a book club discount. In fact, I've advertised book club discount. I'll take 10% off or 20% off the book, but just get some money for the book. I mean, it's nice that they're reading it, but yeah, I think book clubs are a good idea. Just beware though, particularly if they drink in a lot of wine. It could get ugly.
Yeah. I'd say watch out for that one. So podcasting is something that you obviously hold very dear to your heart. And obviously with your new book out, um, which is sort of designed to help people do podcasting the right way, would you say?
Yeah, well, it's called the podcast option, and it's an ebook only. It's only on Amazon, and It did really well when it launched. We did a nice pre-order. By the way, pre-orders is the way to go.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're doing Amazon for your books, the pre-ordering is really a nice way to build up interest, and then you can chart like the day it releases because all those sales are pent up. And like I got to number 3 on the PR charts with this one. So
Yes.
yeah,
Agreed.
I've podcasted off and on since 2006, and I detail in the book that I was very much a hobbyist podcaster until the past couple of years, and because there's reportedly, it depends on who you ask or where you look. There's either 2 million or, as I read this morning, there may be as many as 4 million podcasts out there. Okay, and folks, if you're listening to Richie's and you're listening to mine, there's just two have potentially 4 million shows out there.
Yeah.
Now,
Two of the
not every
best
show's.
ones.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. I was neglectful not to mention that. But yes, my point is in the book is I take just the fact that I'm a veteran broadcaster, I'm a veteran podcaster, both behind the mic, this side of the mic, and the other side of the mic. I've been the interviewer and I've been the guest. I used to be a TV executive. I forgot to mention that before I started my
Mm,
business. So I know a little bit about it. I was a radio show host too.
nice.
And so I bring to it, and Richie, you've been through my hoops. I call them the hoops in the book that you have to jump through to be a guest. And it's a
Yeah.
whole process, but I do it for two reasons. There's a process where, okay, you pitch my show, you want to be on my show. I use Matchmaker FM, or I'll just over the train, and some people email me, and that's great. But I will. I have these things I want to do. First thing I want to do is I want to vet the guest, and there's a few things. I ask the guest to. I'm like, usually what I say is, I think I said it to you. So, oh, because you said something like, I got this. I think I'd be well at this. I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Let me check this out. Let me look a little bit more. Okay, great. Yeah, I think you'd be a great guest. Here's a link. Go to my Calendly, pick a date and a time, and usually the calendar works, but that's a different story. We'll get to that, I think. But you use that, and then there's also a survey page connected to that where you answer about 8 or 10 questions, and all it does is it helps me stay on track and helps me to also prepare for your interview. I ask all my guests for, sounds crazy, give me 100-word intro the way you want to be introduced. I may not always 100% do it the way you want, but I will use
Yeah.
most of that information, and that's helpful for me when I have those weeks when I'm recording anywhere from 2 to 6 shows, but depending, because I have 2 shows, although I'm learning not to do that as much. But the book
Yeah.
talks about those kind of processes. It talks about my thoughts about how to be a good guest, tips on everything from microphones to backgrounds to promotion, a little bit on promotion, but really it's just about finding the best shows if you want to be a guest and finding the best guests for your show. And it's about 10,000 words. You could read it probably in an hour. And I'll say this, I think probably some people think that I'm a bit of a stickler, or I hope they don't think I'm snobby because I have these things, but I just expect I want to do a professional show like you do, Richie. I mean, we have decent microphones. We got our earphones in.
Yeah.
We're both recording from quiet place. I just think that's important because there is real proof that a show that sounds bad, I'm talking about bad ambient noise or just using the external mic in a computer, that can often be
Yeah.
really hard on the ears, and people just don't listen to them. What my podcasting host will show me exactly where in a show people stop listening, and
Yeah.
it's not funny, haha, but it's funny. I look at it and I'll see the shows where I know for a fact the guest showed up and just yelled into their external mic on their laptop, and I can see where those shows, I call it the quit ratio, is really high. They just they're out within 2 or 3 minutes, whereas the shows that
Yeah.
are produced well,
Yeah.
people generally stick around longer. So I don't. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't have all these things in the book that sound like these big rules and hoops to jump through to be a jerk or to make myself sound like I'm bigger than I am or anything like that. I do it because I challenge podcasters to be their best host
Yeah.
and producer, and I challenge guests to be a really good guest, because if you're good, you're eventually going to get noticed. If you're a good guest, you're going to get asked back. If you're a good host, you're going to get lots of great guests. It's just that simple.
Yeah. It's all about user experience, isn't it? You want to, if you're going to create something, you want it to be the best it can possibly be for whoever enjoys it, gets to enjoy it. So it's
Yeah.
no, it's counterproductive, isn't it? It's a waste of time.
Yeah, and yeah, and here's the thing. I want to be very clear about this because I was a hobbyist podcaster for a long time. And to me that's I had a show for Pete's sake about Star Trek Deep Space Nine where it was me and a buddy, and it was not great podcasting. It was a fun show for us because it gave us an excuse every week to get together and just, shoot the breeze and talk about Star Trek or whatever. We did it for about a year, but nobody listened to it. And it got to be pretty onerous. But I learned some lessons there because I'd done that, and I'd done a limited run show with another buddy, and that show, not the one about Star Trek, but this other one, fell into this trap that you can get into if you're not careful. Where if you have a buddy, I know Richie, you occasionally have somebody that you
Yeah,
connect with,
JM,
right?
JM
Yeah,
Williams, yeah.
yeah. And by the way, I've not heard this you two talking, but I mean, if you get on with somebody you're friends and you're good mates and you talk and you get the same interest, you can get to a point where, and I'm not saying you guys do this, I'm just saying if you're not careful, because we did this on our show, you forget that there's listeners. You're just talking to
Yeah.
each other, and you forget that the show is a show. It's entertainment. It's you're
Yeah.
going to lose people. But if you don't care, if you're like, because I know like there's another podcast that I love that totally flouts this rule, a lot of these rules. They have great sound quality. They're very smart. They're great. It's the guys at Astonishing Legends, but their shows are 2 or 3 hours long sometimes.
Yeah, I won't
But
listen
but
to
they
that one.
don't but they don't break the rules like by being boring. It's just lengthy because I've got like a guy I mentioned in my book, and he said, I want your opinion. I'll put it in the book. He's a former podcaster. He said, what is your rule for podcasters? What's the best piece of advice you give me? He says, don't have a show longer than 20 minutes. I don't have time for more than 20 minutes. And I was just like, wow, I have a hard time with that. I have 2 shows. One show is supposed to be 20 minutes. It's never 20 minutes. It's usually
Yeah.
25 or 30 minutes. And then my other Mysterious Goings On is anywhere from 45 to 55. I try though
Yeah.
really hard to keep it down. But if you're having a good conversation, like we did before. I'm doing my best today, by the way. Is you just keep going. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of like I call them hoops. I don't call them rules. I just call them the hoops that I ask people to jump through. Just as you said, to get back to what you just said, which is if you're going to do it right. Have good quality. Be known for that.
Yeah.
So anyway, the podcast option covers a lot of that. I tell tales on myself a little bit in there. Again, I am not perfect. I know that. And my shows are constant works in progress about
Yeah.
improving things. And I also probably need to work on just being more understanding about people that, and remembering that, I'm not, BBC One. I'm not the Today Show in New York. So people coming on the show have no expectation that they should act like they're on that show. But I just try to be as professional as I can so that we may not be BBC One or we may not be NPR, but by golly, we put on a show that we have nothing to be embarrassed about, that's entertaining, and it moves along. So
Yeah, most definitely. And how have you found podcasting? Has that helped you with your writing and your business?
it's helped me with my business, in particular. PR After Hours is my obviously my PR related podcast, and it's really not just about PR. It's about business in general. And I have interviewed. It's only been out year and a half now, and we've already done. My gosh, I think at least 60 interviews, and I've met so many wonderful, interesting people, and
Yeah.
and on that show and Mysterious Goings On. But I would say that one has really helped me with my business. It's helped me. I do a lot of crisis communication planning for part of my business, and I've talked that up there. And I've had people who've listened to the show call me to ask me to consult on their crisis work.
Cool.
Whereas Mysterious Goings On, which is the show you were thankfully a really great guest on recently, is more about creativity and writing and all that. I don't know if it's helped me sell a single book, but it has really helped me meet other good writers and good people
Yeah.
who encourage me. I just interviewed. He'll be the season kickoff. We're going to be going into our brief hiatus for part of June, and then we'll be back in July for both shows. I just interviewed Doug Skelton, the Scottish author, a mystery thriller, Tartan Noir author,
Oh,
and
nice.
he was on 2019, and I had him back because he's got a new book out, and it was like being with an old friend, And
Yeah.
those are the interviews I like. I mean, it's like you said, you and I, we have a lot in common, and I feel like when I've learned from you, and I hopefully, well, one thing you've learned from me is that I talk a lot, but the other thing is I hope some of it's helpful, and
Oh yeah,
that's the
definitely. I've
thing.
learned loads.
Well, and that's the thing about the podcasting too is how we talked about this earlier about okay, if you want to sell your books, you want to make your books popular, you got to find your readers where they are. I think podcasting is a great way to do that. I think the days that like when I first started it in 2006 and all that the Wild West days as I called them are about over. It's very corporate now, and it's very tough for with 4 million shows out there. It's very tough for a podcast, especially one like ours where we're just these blokes who we've got a microphone and a dream, but the idea that it's like our books, we're these drops and we're these mighty drops, but we're in a vast ocean. And I think
Yeah,
it's the same thing with podcasts. So I would say to anybody, and I say this in the book, I say to anybody who wants to start a podcast, do it.
yeah,
I've advised several people. A buddy of mine I mentioned he wanted to start a music podcast, start with local musicians here in town. I told him, I said, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to get like an instant audience. Probably you're going to find like you're going to feel like you're screaming into the void because you just see your downloads aren't going anywhere for a while, or
yeah,
maybe they dip. That I said, but I guess I sound a little negative, Richie. I do that because I want people to be realistic and
yeah,
understand there's a lot of work goes into my shows. It usually takes me per show anywhere from I'm just the recording is just part of it, right? There's
yeah,
the pre-show where you're reading up on people, reading their books if you can, but at the very least
yeah,
reading about them. Then you do the show. That's about an hour, really, depending on who and which show. And then after that, it's like production on the show. That for me, that's another hour. So mysterious goings on, then promotion and pushing it out.
yeah.
That's 4 hours
Four,
a week,
4 hours. Yeah,
and yeah, and then PR after hours is probably a good 2.5 to 3 hours a week. So there
yeah,
you go, right there. I'm doing 7 hours, let's say, a week on that, and that doesn't even include social media push outs for older shows that I want to keep remind people about. Like there's
yeah,
this great guy Richie Billing. I always push that one out because I want people to listen. So I just tell people it's work. And you're gonna, excuse me, you're gonna need to be consistent, and you're
yeah,
gonna have to get comfortable with the fact that you're probably not gonna, have a million downloads your first year. If you do, call me, tell me how you did it.
yeah, yeah. Most definitely. But like, it's like anything, you only get what you put into it. So if you're not prepared to put the work in, then you can't really expect to get results.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the same with the writing. Yeah, just like you said, um, I I I have a writer who's got my cell phone, or not a writer, a reader who loves my series. She has my cell phone number. She texts me once a month. When is the book going to be ready? When is the book going to be ready? That's the greatest feeling in the world. It's the same thing with the podcast. When somebody
Yeah,
on Twitter retweets, I've got a fan of the show who often retweets good episodes. My friend Terry, and she just says this is such a great, interesting, exploration about whatever the episode was about.
yeah,
That's right there is for me is really the good one. Or when now, of course, publicists, PR people who mysterious goings on in particular, I get a lot of publicists because they want me to get their authors on my show.
yeah,
They'll tell me, "Oh, you really are a good interviewer. You've got these dulcet tones, and my clients are just raving about what a great interview. And I'm like, oh my god, you don't have to butter me up.
yeah.
I'll
You can
put
tell
your
when it's
but
bullshit.
yeah, you can tell when it's bullshit. Although one of them, and I told this publicist this. I told her, Andy. I told her, I said, don't kid a kid. I'm a PR person. So she forwarded me an email from an author who said, I was dubious about the being on that little show, but that guy was such a fun interview. I had a great time. I want to come back. And I was like,
Yeah,
okay, all right. That's what makes it worthwhile, man.
yeah,
And
most definitely.
and but here, you know what? Ultimately though, Richie, and I'm sincere about this. If I didn't have mysterious goings on, I would never would have met you.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
and vice versa.
yeah,
So yeah,
and
and there you go, makes connections and makes friendships
yeah,
across the globe.
and when I come to town, I'm gonna fully expect we go get a pint or something. That's
Almost
just the way it's.
definitely, yeah. But already got our trip lined up.
Mm.
There you go. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. It's been Alex. It's been just wonderful having you here. Absolute pleasure. And if you want any more information on Alex's PR, marketing, and writing, please go and check out his two shows. Links are both in the description. And I've also put the links to Alex's website as well. Um, as well, Alex has got the John Pilot mysteries as well. It's John Pilot, is it right?
It is, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Because I said Pilates before, because
It's
Pilates
the right.
like are popular in Liverpool with all the women
Well,
trying to get in shape.
you know that's a running joke in the series too. Is everybody calls it Pilates, so I don't, I just roll with it when people do that. I
Yeah,
love it.
there you go then. Yeah. So yeah, and check out that. I'm gonna might even dive into this tonight. You never know.
Oh,
Um,
good luck.
yeah, Pilot's key. Here we go.
There you go. Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, it's
yeah,
got sex, murder. What else do you want? Beaches. I mean, there you go. So,
there you go. Yeah. So thanks very much, Alex. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you again for listening. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe and tell your friends.